As an experiment, because I was teaching here at Swarthmore College, I decided to offer a course called Nonviolent Responses to Terrorism and see if anybody would come. We had to lottery the course. There were so many students who were excited about this different approach. What their job was to write, each student had to choose a country that is currently threatened by terrorism. Get to know that country, its strengths, its weaknesses. Develop a defense strategy for that country against the threat. A strategy that would be nonviolent in character. That was their term paper for this semester. There were 8 different tools that I discovered in my research that have been used actually by various nation states as defense modes. For example, one of those tools, you want an example, one of those tools is economic development. That is, do economic development in the area where the prime recruiting ground is for terrorists, because terrorists are very often motivated by economic injustice and economic oppression. And if you turn that situation around, provide plentiful jobs, a lot of the people who otherwise will decide on a career of terrorism will get a job and be straightforward citizens. And so that's one of the 8. What terror does, even the threat of terror to some degree, but what actual acts of terror does, is traumatize the people most affected and the people who know them. And the trauma then takes political form and increases that nation's likelihood of doing stuff to the attacker that increases the amount of the attack. That's what happened in 9/11. The U.S., by its response to Afghanistan, increased, and then Iraq, increased the total number of terrorists available in the world, increased Osama bin Laden's prominence. It was just this amazing. It was the U.S. decided to be the primary recruiter of terrorists against itself. But it did that not because it's so stupid as to want to recruit terrorists for Osama bin Laden, not intentionally, but because the trauma itself forced the U.S. into doing this mad thing that anybody pragmatic would not want to do. So another tool of these 8 is to go right into a healing mode for the people who are traumatized. In this case, in the U.S., it was really the whole population that was traumatized by the 9/11 experience. So that's another example of a tool. So it would take, though, it's hard to summarize those tools because it took a whole semester to really lay them out so that the students had enough ability to operate with them. They did fantastic papers. In the meantime, the Pentagon heard about this and asked me to come down. And so I went down and met with a policy unit of the Pentagon that had to do with responding to terrorism. And these were professionals in the field. I'm not a professional in the field of terrorism, but there they were. So I laid it all out, and I said in the beginning, the one reason why I want to lay out these 8 for you is not only because the students, who are definitely not experts, they're undergraduates, were able to make so much sense with their defense planning for the various countries that they chose, including Israel, including the U.S., including Indonesia and other countries that are threatened. Not only were the students able to write papers that made so much sense, but also you as experts, I'm hoping for you to show more about how synergies will happen by the combination of the 8. Because yes, there are countries that tried number 2 and number 5. But what do you do if you take all 8, forget about the military response, just say instead of a military response, who have a nonviolent response, use those 8 synergistically with each other so that the whole will be greater than the sum of its parts. I want you as experts to give me that kind of feedback. Instead, what I got from their point of view was the U.S. government doesn't operate that way. The U.S. government doesn't operate in terms of systemic alternative approaches. There's no way that our politics can handle that. It's way too polarized. The way ideas get before the president And certainly an alternative of this scope would have to go before the president. The way proposals get to the president trims them out, makes them subject to lowest common denominator among the various agencies that are involved, and there's no way that that kind of package, as promising as it is, in fact, what the experts said, we have no problem with anything you've said, but that kind of systemic shift is beyond the capacity of the United States government. So I was grateful to the course, which I've taught a couple of times since, not only as an indication of how undergraduates can do brilliant work if they're given a toolbox that's appropriate, as compared with the toolbox that's inappropriate called the Pentagon. And also, I learned that second lesson, that the US government is configured in such a way that it cannot make a creative nonviolent response that would be far more effective than the response that we've been making.